All right, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're having a great start of your week wherever you are. I'm in Berkeley, California, and I can't say it's sunny because the sun isn't up yet. Anywho, we are here to talk about assets. And as I was thinking through these and this learning, I realized we might have to do 2 sessions on these. And I will also point out on the Atlassian community events, there are a lot of other great resources on assets. I'll talk about those at the end. And those are important for me because I haven't used assets as much as I probably should be using them. So here we're going to dig into them, learn a little bit about what they are, and hopefully get hands-on with them. Now, if you have questions about assets, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to be doing my best to keep track of all of those questions because I know some of them tend to get lost in the chat sometimes. So please help keep me honest if you have a question and I miss it, but I'll be doing my best to go through and catch them. So without any further ado, we're going to jump in. Very quick slide decks. And I also have an announcement on the next ACP level certification we're going to be learning together towards the end of this. So be on the lookout for that announcement. I'll also be announcing it over in our Discord channel, which I'll drop the link right there. Another great place to go if you're looking at learning more and just getting more information about these certifications, but just about Atlassian stuff kind of in general. So here we go. He says very anticlimactically. A quick introduction. My name is Rob. For those of you who don't know me, I've been using Jira for about 10 years, and I mainly have not been the org admin, the person maintaining all of Jira. I've been a project admin. So I finally got the ACP-420 certification after using this for about 10 years, and I chose to get it to fill in all of the gaps in my knowledge because I learned by doing, and I didn't know a lot of things like assets. They just weren't part of the organizations I happened to work at. And so when I was thinking through what do I want to learn, I picked this certification because I'm very familiar with Jira Service Management, but not so much, but not too much. There's a lot of gaps in my knowledge that were very good to close up. Now, to interact, please use the chat. Some of you have found it already. I'll ask some questions in there, but more importantly, please drop your questions. We're going to be going through the Atlassian Learning Training on Assets and going hands-on in a Jira Cloud Premium instance. So you'll see me switch between those. But if you need something clarified, if you have something you want to add, or if you want to help out someone else, please jump on in. One of the great things about these sessions is we have a lot of smart people who join them, and you can learn from folks, not just me, and I also get to learn from you. So if you realize I'm going down the wrong path, or if you want to point something out or add to things, and you're comfortable, jump into the chat. And of course, please like the stream, but also save and share it. I guarantee you there's someone else you work with or know who can benefit from this kind of stuff. So please feel free to pass it around. Welcome from Brazil and Armenia and Indianapolis. Again, our topic this week is assets. As I briefly mentioned at the start, we might break this into 2 sessions. There's a lot to learn about assets. When I took the exam, there weren't too many questions on it, but it is a big topic and it can be a very useful tool. So we may spend a little bit more time in the next few weeks on this before we wrap up the ACP-420 entirely. What we're looking at now is the Atlassian learning on this, and I'll drop a link. I actually don't think I can link you directly to this, but I'll quickly get us over to Atlassian learning so you have this link. And it's a pretty chunky module. And that makes a lot of sense because when I think of an organization and tracking assets, organizations tend to have a lot of assets, shockingly. Now, when I think of assets, I stereotypically think of computers. And that is because my background is IT help desk. So you will hear me use laptops and monitors and things like that quite a bit as the example of them. But please keep in mind, assets don't have to be just the stock of computers your organization has. It can be a lot of other things. For example, the physical buildings your organization operates in, your facilities. It could be something else like your employees or workers. This next link I'm dropping is to the learning for this, and you'll find the one that I'm doing under Start Prepping for free. And then I believe it's Become an Effective Jira Service Admin and Configure Jira Service Management for Team Goals. And there's an assets option there. Keep track of your organization's assets. So again, these assets aren't just our computers. They could be our physical facilities, our buildings. Oh, you can't see me. I disappeared. very rude of me. I'm sorry. There we go. So we're going to quickly orient on what they are, talk about how we navigate through them, but then like many things in Jira Service Management, it isn't just about knowing the tool and what is technically possible. It's about working with our team to figure out how do we want to use assets? What do we need to track? And this is where many groups trip up. It doesn't matter what the feature is. Are we talking about request types or issue types or assets? Groups tend to not take enough time to understand what assets are, and then why do we want to use them? They tend to just say, put things in there and we're good to go, when really a lot of work needs to be done to think through how can this all operate. Good to see you, Kaither. Now, as I mentioned, assets can be any physical thing, a resource, or a component that your organization uses. So as you're thinking of assets and what can I track in Jira, don't just consider, again, the physical hardware, your laptops, your monitors, etc. There's a ton of examples in here. It could be vehicles. It could be data around things, like the manufacturer of something. It could be software. It could be the ITSM assets or the physical things. It could be your employees' workers. Now, assets itself is just an Atlassian product. So an asset is a single thing within it. When I talk about assets, I'm talking about the module within Atlassian. These terms honestly confuse me. I understand what they're saying, and I need to sit down and think about them more. A configuration item is an instance of an entity that is part of your environment. So a configuration item for me is just an asset. It's that laptop, it's that person, it's that building, it's that thing we're offering. I didn't see the term configuration item show up too much on the exam, but just keep in mind when you see that in a question or when you're talking to someone, they're referring to some kind of asset. It's something you can configure and adjust and modify based on your organization's needs. Now, the generic term for what assets does is a configuration management database, or part of what it does. And that's a collection of all the stuff your organization has and how it's set up. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do I care about that? But it gives you a lot of different benefits we'll talk about as we go. But again, using that laptop example, if I know that, I'll use Kaitra as the example, she's got a laptop that has certain hardware on it or certain software, I can then track my licensing. Or if it breaks, I can go order the right components. Or if I have a physical building that has a certain internet provider, I know who to reach out to if something breaks. Now, anytime I see these blue boxes in these learnings, I tell myself, aha, this is a clue. I should really understand these topics. So an asset is anything with intrinsic value. So again, it's something your organization wants to track and keep track of. And then a configuration item is an entity or thing that is required for the delivery of a service. Have I ever used this term in day-to-day speech? No. However, if it pops up, I just need to keep in mind, all right, it's an instance of an entity. It's something I want to track, and then I can modify and configure the attributes of. Some examples of how it can work. The stereotypical example, again, is hardware. Here we're seeing a worker who is requesting a new laptop, and then the IT team can track what she's requested. So, for example, she may pick, I need a laptop, and it needs to be this certain model. And then the IT team can go see if they have that, find any approvals based on that. Some ways businesses benefit, and again, please ask me to slow down or dig in. There's a ton to assets. We're still talking kind of at that conceptual level. What are they? Why do we care? So we haven't even yet spoken about what does it look like in Jira, but this is important. A lot of benefits. Assets are an extra step we have to do. They have to be added and maintained, and someone has to administer them. But by giving us more information about the asset in Jira on that work item, we can do things like close out the request because there's more data available more immediately. We can get done faster. We can do things like understand what happens if I change something, or if something breaks, or if part of a facility goes offline because the power goes out, I can understand what else could be impacted. It also gives my workers a lot of context. So if my agents are working on a ticket, especially a major incident, something very big that breaks, a particular server goes offline, they can get more information about why that's important, what's impacted, and how their work can feed into the fix and the solve. For me, as someone managing a team or a help desk, though, the visibility for me is the big part. assets allow me to understand what's going on, and I don't have to guess at how many laptops, had to be repaired in the past year. I don't have to sit there and wonder how many, buildings went offline due to a particular network problem, things like that. And for those people who absolutely love compliance, which I believe it's a very important thing, but it can be challenging, this also gives us a better way to audit what we have and then prove to compliance auditors, yes, we've got everything tracked, we know where everything is, and can make that a lot easier. We won't have to scramble for records or dig through a spreadsheet of all of our hardware to figure out what's going on. So now digging more into how are assets expressed in Jira Service Management. When we start setting them up, we have a lot of control over what's on them. There are some templated ones and some defaults. So I've got a demo box where we'll take a look at some in a moment. But we can define the asset types as well as attributes around them. So again, an example of an asset type might be a laptop or a room in a building or even an individual human. And then we can define attributes around those assets. So in the example of a computer, what brand is it? What date was it manufactured? What is the warranty? In the example of a room in a building, what kind of video software, video conferencing does it have? What kind of chargers does it have for laptops? In the case of a worker, how much tenure do they have or when were they hired? Now, just if you're familiar with Confluence and like a hierarchy and a structure, or if you're familiar with any kind of hierarchy, we can have parent-child relationships between our assets. So I'm going to pop over into Jira real quick and just visually show this. So we are looking at assets around physical hardware. So again, computers and things. And I have groups here on the left, and we'll talk about what a schema tree is in a moment. But I have something called a hardware catalog, and that has children. That has, we have mice that we support. And under supported mice, I have 4 different types of mice. And then under supported laptops, I have more children. I have MacBook Pro, I have a 16 whatever. And so I can build this structure to provide some organization to these. So I can take a look at my hardware catalog and just see what I offer. And then I can dig in more and say, hey, what kind of phones do we offer? And then, of course, as we offer more phones, I have to add them, or as we retire some, I have to remove them. And so that gives us this hierarchical relationship. That's a fun word to say out loud. Now, we can also have dependencies between these things. And the easy example here is software. On my iPhone, I have certain software I can install, so I can make that software dependent on the iPhone. And there are ways to visualize representations. There was a question that I saw in the exam that had this. I was unfamiliar with what it was. Again, I need to study assets more and use them more. But I was able to logic my way through it. I could look at it and based on how the arrows pointed at things and the colors they were, kind of guess and infer about the question. And that's important to remember if you choose to sit this exam and you are just unfamiliar with a topic. Take a minute to sit and think and go, okay, the nice people at Atlassian, 1, want me to succeed, but 2, want products and tools that are as easy as possible to use. And so sometimes you can sit there and figure out an answer that you're comfortable with, even if you don't know everything about the question. You can tie in automations to assets. So just something we'll talk about. There's a whole module here at the end. But you can do things like send updates, trigger other events as assets, have things happen to them. You can import data to them. And again, this is a use case that I haven't personally used. But you can pull in information through CSV to populate assets or add information to them. And again, as a help desk manager, reporting for me is a big thing. The screenshot here is a great example. It's basically saying how many laptops do we have and what status. So I can see there's a whole bunch in stock. I've got 1 ready for pickup. I've got a bunch that are damaged. So by storing this information in Jira, not only can we report just on assets, but we can combine that with other information. I've mentioned a few ways to use assets. The stereotypical one for me is tracking hardware. But you could also build a CRM, a customer relationship management database. So think you're a sales team. You could do that in here. So as you're thinking of assets, don't just get stuck on the IT example. And then HR, human resources, is another one. So you can use this to track facilities or even workers and how they're moving through your organization. Now, this is probably going to be on top of a dedicated system for that, but by having this information in Jira, you can tie it. You can instantly find all the requests they've made very easily or see how other things impact them. So that was kind of the like, what is it at a very high level. This next section digs into more of the mechanics of them and just specific features around the assets module. Excuse me. Now, again, these terms in yellow are important just to know. An object schema is just a collection of everything about the assets. So if I back up, this is a list of object schemas that I have. So I have different groupings of types of things. I have customer support things and facilities things and IT things. And each of these is structured differently. So if I open up customer support, I can see the customer support team needs to track a thing called a country, and a thing called a company, and a thing called a customer type. But collectively, all of this is the object schema. It's the mapping and understanding of how they all relate. Now, you might say to yourself, hey, let's just do one giant schema for everything. However, your data and your things that you are tracking may differ substantially enough that they won't all fit. So that's one reason. For example, my IT employee assets, my laptops, don't share much in common with the people that work here. So I need a different schema to track that. Another thing you might need to consider, though, is in our schemas, we have various settings, and we can do things like restrict access to them. So we might need, like, for example, which one did I click on here? My customer support schema, maybe I need to restrict so only people can access it. There's customer information in there that I only want the 3 directors on the team to see. So I have to put some security around this particular schema that I don't need on, say, my facilities schema. The blue box, again, is another great reminder. And this point here for me is more about how do we use this tool. So when we're considering using assets, one thing we need to think about is who in my organization is going to be using these assets, whether it's those laptops or those facilities or those people. And then what kind of support are they going to need and how will they be updating it? Because it's one thing to set all this up, and it's another thing over time, who's going to manage it? My IT manager has to manage those IT hardware objects. So I need to set it up in a way that, one, makes sense for them, but two, they can go in and actually do that. You'll hear the term objects a lot. An object is just the asset itself, so it's a generic term for the thing we're tracking. That thing could be a piece of software, it could be a laptop, it could be a building, a person, etc. So you'll see that term object quite a bit. Now, an object can have an object type. So these object types just help you group things by characteristics. And they can be whatever you want, there's no restriction, and you can have as many as you need. So as you're thinking through what you want to track, you might say, okay, we've got these things called laptops, and I've got a lot of them. Where's my laptops? I've got my laptops, and they are a supported laptop as their object type. I've got a thing called a monitor, which confusingly has a mouse icon. That's interesting. And it has this one particular monitor in it, but the object type would be monitor. Every object is in one and only one type. It's similar to how a request type is one and only one work item type. So if you understand that relationship, that can help you here. And you'll see this term a lot in here. An object, an instance of something, that just means it's a copy of something. We have an instance of Jira. We have our own copy that's separate from everything else. I have an instance of a computer mouse, and I'll hold up one here just as a physical prop. This one mouse is separate from all the other mice that I own. This is important to remember. Objects can be made manually. They can also be made automatically through different things, automations, integrations, etc. So when we think through our process, we need to consider how do objects get in there. One way I can type them out, but I might have some kind of integration with my order management system that every time we buy a new laptop, it generates a new object in Jira for me, so I don't have to go do it myself. So when you're thinking through the entire start to finish process, you need to consider how are they going to get in there. And actually, I've got a question for the group because the chat's kind of quiet. I'm curious how your org manages assets currently. I've been at places that use a Google Excel spreadsheet. I've been at places that didn't. And I've been at places that have multiple systems that help them track everything. So just curious how you and your experience have done all this. And I've mentioned that there's this hierarchy. Object types can have parents and children. And I'll see if I can go find one in here. I think facilities does it. Yes. So under this schema, I've got facilities information, and I have safety and security as an object type. And under that, I have access keys, but also fire extinguishers. So the safety and security object type has a child object type, fire extinguishers. And in fire extinguishers, I can see the models. Chad, no idea on how they do it. Yep. Scott just starting on his assets journey. Scott, I'd love to hear from you in a couple of months how that's going. And again, that's my own curiosity. What is it like going from Excel? And I'm chuckling because that is such a common way of doing it, because that tool can work. The advantage of this, though, is it ties it into all of our other information, right? And it reduces your reliance on a spreadsheet. Important call out, the hierarchy is mainly a visual aid for you as a human. It can do some things. Oh, Olympia actually uses assets. I love it. It's mainly as a human looking at it to understand what's going on. There are some things, though, that can inherit down. So you can configure some information on the parent to be pushed down to the children as you create them. And also, it can help with search. So if you have a very complex schema, you might say, hey, show me all the servers and all children, or show me all laptops and everything under it. Kythra, I'd love to see personal uses. Again, assets just track anything that is of any value to us. It doesn't have to be corporate. And Olympia, I'd be curious your experience using assets. Like, what's been the biggest pain point, or what do you find most interesting about them, if you're okay sharing? Oh, well, I am... Now, on an object, there you'll find information. And the generic term for that is just an attribute. My laptop has an attribute called serial number. And for this specific laptop, that serial number is 12345, or whatever it is. Lucy, love the question, and team would love to hear your response. And again, the simple example is it might have multiple, they'll have multiple attributes per thing. And keep in mind, and this is a more 101 concept, but they all have the same attributes, but the value of that attribute will differ. So every laptop will have a different serial number. You may have the same value across different laptops, though. They all might have the same operating system installed, but that doesn't mean it's the same on all of them. Kythra, that is a good personal example. You could have an object schema that has your personal hardware. That might include your computer, and that includes attributes, the operating system you have, different pieces of software that you can then track tickets to keep track of what's going on. You might have, I have cats, you might have an object schema called household pets, and that might have an object type of cat, and that might have an object called Maple, one of my cats, and Maple might have attributes, vaccination schedules, date of birth, breed, color, etc. So if something happens to Maple, I have all that information right there. I actually just thought I'll have to tinker with that one. Now, assets have dependencies. And this is what helped me the most. This diagram is the visualization we'll see sometimes, but I can see that we have an asset called a website. Okay, great. And that website impacts something called billing. So the way the arrow points is direction of impact. SSO is defined on the website, though. Updates happen to the website, but the website also impacts my customer service team and my service catalog. Now, these dependencies help us understand how things interrelate. So I know if I change SSO, I might impact the website. And if something happens to the website, the customer support team may be impacted in some way. Excuse me. So their example here is HR. We might have an HR object schema around employees, workplaces, and businesses, and then information about employee assets. And then we can link those assets to employees. So if we look up an employee, we can figure out what office they're in and what kind of laptop they have. If you are a little bit more technical, and this actually makes sense to me, when I first saw something like this, it took me weeks to understand. But if you understand how databases operate, the overall database is called the object schema. So that's everything within it. Now, within every database, there's multiple tables. Think like a Excel workbook. Your Excel workbook is this top level of the database, and then you'll have sheets in there. Each sheet is an object type. Hardware, cat, employee. Now, a column in that spreadsheet is an attribute. So an attribute of a laptop might be operating system. An attribute of a building might be HVAC. I'm trying to make up a building example. An attribute of a cat might be color. It's fur color. And then a row is a particular object, one thing of that type. Cat, floor, person. Ooh, collectibles. That's another good example, Kythra. Again, thinking of non-work examples that more of us probably understand. Chad using it to track DVDs. I love that. And this is where these tools that we have, we always think of, hey, it's corporate only, it's just for my job. Yes, that's what it's designed for, but if we can understand the underlying concept, we can apply it to anything. And that helps both professionally. If I'm just stuck on assets only helps me with IT and tracking hardware, that means I can't then use it to track my facilities information or other things. But if I just understand, what an object is, it's something I want to track in an object type, I can then track anything. And then I can start to think through how else could I use this tool. It doesn't have just one purpose. Here we are seeing a screenshot of assets. And it's with the old UI, so just a heads up, this looks slightly different now. Hopefully they fix this soon. The hierarchy is the thing on the left, and then we can add things to the hierarchy. Actually, I'll just show you this in the new UI. That'll probably make much more sense. Is this the similar? Yes, okay. So here I am in one of my schemes, and I've got my tree here. So this is just showing me what object groups do I have, or what item groups. I've got mice and all that under here. I can add to this. I can add a new object type under laptop. So maybe I want to break this out and say Windows laptops. And now I have a thing called Windows laptops. And I can come in here and tinker with the settings. What roles? So this is my permissions. Maybe I only want certain people to know that Windows laptops exist. And here we have that inheritance. So again, considering, do I want things to inherit down? Once I open up one of these groups, though, on the right, I'll see individual objects. So in this list, each of these things is one object. Let me see if I can find laptop. Here we go. And go away sidebar. Can I make this any bigger? No. So in the gray bar, I have the actual objects. So each of these represents one physical laptop. The stuff on the left is more of a logical grouping. It's just saying, hey, we support these laptops, and here are all the ones we do support. But then I can see each of them have different attributes. The name is an attribute. The screen size is an attribute. The CPU is an attribute. But if I go look at supported phones, this particular phone will have different attributes. Type or manufacturer, because it's a different type of object. Olympia has pain points with assets, the design and change management. And the best is the reporting and linking between schemas. Oh, interesting. That's good to know. I can imagine that at scale, this can be challenging to maintain, and that's where probably a lot of automation can help out with it. It's good to know the reporting has been a good thing for you, though, Olympia. And that, for me, is thinking through this tool is probably one of the biggest pluses around assets. You can more quickly find information about it. You do have related actions. Excuse me. So you can search through the schema. And again, you need to go find one particular thing in there. You can get that graph view. So you can get the relationships between object types. And then again, the big thing is the reporting. But note that only Jira or site admins have access to that. So if I go back over here. Oh, they changed it all? Yeah, they changed it all. Yay. I'm kind of chuckling because they updated this entire certification just before team, and that was before they updated the UI, and then the UI updated. So I'm sure whoever made this course is kind of kicking themselves. All right, an attribute, again, is a piece of information on the asset. Now, examples are the model number of a computer, or description, who owns it. Okay, great. There isn't really a limit to the type or number of attributes you can have. So again, don't get stuck in, oh, it's got to be related to hardware. It's just something about that object you want to track. For a book, it could be the author. It could be the date you bought it. It could be the original publishing date. It's any piece of information about an object you want to keep track of for some reason. And that's where it's important when we're planning out how do we want to use assets. We need to ask ourselves, hey, for my pen collection, what is important for me to understand about each individual pen? I just found that, so I picked it up and gave it as an example. Every attribute has a name, and that name is what we see on the screen. Again, model number, date of purchase. They also have a key. Every object gets a unique key. This one I'm still trying to figure out how do I use. And then also a created and updated date. So it's created just like we stamp, it's called. We record and we don't change the date an object is added or an issue is added. I said the word I'm not supposed to say. Let me go find my magic thing here. If you see this pop up, that means I said the word that I'm not supposed to say, because those are now called work items. And it also tracks the updated date. Again, just like a work item has a date that it is updated, we do the same thing with objects. And this is useful for tracking changes, or hey, when has something been modified? Now, those are the four required attributes. You can have as many other custom ones as you want. So if I go back into assets and I like going back to laptops. I've got the name, which is required. I've got the created and modified down here in the bottom right under my big giant head. Oh, I can't hear. I'll go up here. There we go. In the bottom right, I've got created and modified. And somewhere in here, there should be a key, IEA 176. So similar to a work item key, we're also going to have that object key. Different types of attributes, default, text, numeric data, etc. So just what type of information can we contain on the asset itself? Things like status, how is it being applied or configured? Or you can reference other, you can reference other asset objects. Other types we have, so again, just different types of information we can choose to record on our assets. And for me, this all starts with planning and considering what do we need to track and why. What do I want to track about my book collection or my DVDs or my laptops or my workers? Another important call out, and again, this is especially for sitting the exam, we can change the asset type as long as nothing is using it. We can change the type of data in that attribute. But if it's being used somewhere, we can't. This is very common in systems, and this is to ensure we don't break anything on the back end. So if you have a book in your assets, an object called a book, and you have filled in the attribute purchase date, you can't change anything about purchase date. You'd have to go through and remove that value from all objects with it to go modify it. So this is a reminder, and again, something like this could show up on the exam, but we want to consider very carefully what types of information go into each attribute so we don't have to go do a lot of work later. Permissions and roles. Now, I've mentioned that we can do permissions against assets. So imagine you have a certain object schema that you only want certain people to edit or access. This is similar to org item security or page restrictions in Confluence. Jira admins are the only folks who can do everything. So just something to consider. And this makes sense. You're the admin. That's what you should be doing. On the object schema level, you can configure them as well to allow execution of actions. And on the object type, you can also have permissions. So you can have permissions on the object schema. So I might say, Rob can do certain things against everything in here, and then each object type may have its own specific permissions. This is a very important call out. Object type permissions, so the lowest level, takes precedence over object schema permissions. Now, what that means in plain English, if I have special permissions to edit laptops, I can edit laptops even if I don't have that permission against hardware catalog. And so that's to ensure that if my job is to go manage laptops and something changes against part of the schema at the higher level, the grouping, I can still go do that. So it's a little bit more permissive, than some systems might be. Now, they do call out examples like that can be a bit of a pain. So when we think of permissions, we have a schema that's just a configuration of permissions. We may want to break them out and instead just have a separate schema entirely, because it's easier for us as admins to manage and maintain than trying to remember, oh, right, Rob had that one exception in this one place. We just have an entire different schema we can give him. There's also roles, which are roles generically are just a collection of permissions or abilities we have in a system. A role can be admin, a role can be IT manager, etc. Now, global admins, global Jira admins and asset admins are accepted out of this. Otherwise, every user has a specific role in there. And only Jira and asset admins can assign users. Asset managers can do it at the schema level, and Jira and asset admins can do it at the global level. Excuse me. Ooh, and I clearly need more coffee. Ooh. User is as you would expect, the most basic permission. They can go in and view them. They can't create or edit. So your IT help desk team might be users. They can go in and access information about assets, but they can't go modify them. Kind of the next step up, we have the developer. They can create and modify individual objects, but they cannot make object types or attributes and can't delete objects. So this might be a more senior person on the help desk who has to go in and manage and maintain your schema and take some of that load off of you as the admin, but they can't go through and delete things, and they can't add new object types. So the next level up, we have the assets manager. They can go configure the structure of things. They can go make object types, attributes, and references. Now, all of these may show up on your exam if you sit it, but they are also good to remember as you're considering how do you maintain your assets. How many managers will you need? Who will they be? Because these are the folks who can go in and add new object types and attributes, but also make relationships and import information. So managing import jobs, I think it was Olympia mentioned maintaining this thing is a challenge. This is an important level because this is where you can pull in information from other systems, whether it's a manual import or something else. The asset admin, again, another step up. They can configure all the assets globally in your instance. And then there's your Jira admin who can do pretty much everything. All right, team. We're blowing through a lot of good stuff. What questions or concerns do you have before we just talk more about the conceptual, where do we start with this thing? And while you ponder that question, I'll quickly get a sip of coffee. So I've mentioned assets are a tool, and like any tool, we need to understand more about them and how they work. Part of this is how do we start using them? And the answer is not we start building them into Jira. The answer is sitting down and asking our team a whole bunch of questions, probably more than this, to figure out the answers. All of these questions help us understand what do we need to do with this thing called assets and why do we need to do it. These are very important questions for us to ask and answer because they will guide our development of the platform. In the same way, I go to my team and I ask them, what kind of things do we have to support for our customers, or how do our agents intend to work? I want to ask, hey, what are we going to store in each schema? What kind of devices do we want to manage? What do we have to understand about our devices, or our people, or our books, or our DVDs? Chad, clarification on, how it works with a database reference. For me, assets got a lot easier to understand when I started thinking of other things I already know that are technical, the database analogy, a spreadsheet analogy, and then as we've been talking, the personal analogies, my book collection. I have these skateboard decks behind me. These could be assets in Jira that I want to track. When did I purchase them, for how much, who made them, etc. So if we can find other things that we're already familiar with, and then find analogies and connections between them, it makes learning and understanding concepts a lot easier, because the underlying concept of assets is something we all probably understand at some level. We just don't realize it yet. And so I'll encourage folks to keep engaging with these, keep talking to people, keep getting more training, join us in that Discord and ask questions, just to help unlock that, because I guarantee you probably know a lot of this already. You just don't realize it because you don't connect it to the terms that the nice people at Atlassian use. This is another great call out. Anytime we have a new tool, pick one specific use case to use. And I'm saying that because it'll help you as the admin or person. Sorry, Justin. When will Atlassian allow me to clone or recreate an asset within a schema? I have no idea, my friend. If you're starting to use assets, pick one use case that you understand fairly well. Again, in my personal use case, it might be my book collection. I understand my books and why I want to track them. At work, it might be tracking our laptops, because that's really confusing for folks. Having a clear use case makes it easier for you as the admin, as the person suggesting this, to define what you want to do and help ensure that you can manage those pain points and address them. So if you are starting to use assets or struggling to use them or considering it, pick one specific use case and knock that out of the park, so you can use it as an example, as something to point at to say, hey, here's how it works. How do we organize data? So anything connected logically should be in its own schema. Okay, that makes sense. So all my IT information should have one schema. All my HR information should have a different schema. All my information about my household pets should have a different schema. All my information about my media collection, my DVDs, my books, my whatever, should have a different one. I really like this call out in the middle. Programmers and database admins are familiar with this concept of the object structure, so go talk to them. So in your organization, there's probably someone who is really good at this type of concept. So if you can go find that person and talk to them, that might help you understand what's going on. You might also pull them into your project and say, hey, database admin, here's what we're trying to do. Let me explain it to you. Can you help me understand it for my use case? So this is a great call out, and I just chuckle that they kind of threw it in here. It doesn't feel like a throwaway, but it's just a fun thing to find. Like, oh yeah, go talk to these people who are probably very familiar with this information. Now, like many things, assets come with templates. There are a number of different templates that show up, and I'll drop a link here in the chat. If you're curious for more, but you can kind of kickstart what's going on. Now, they come with different object types already built out. Scott has another good use case or good example of assets. It can help within between teams in your organization. So I'll see if I can describe this for folks, Scott. You have laptops in the IT side, and your IT team is working on those, but finance can also use that information for budgeting. How many do we have to retire this year? How many new ones do we have to buy? How many were damaged, or how much does it cost to repair or replace them? So when we consider our data, we also need to consider how it helps between people. Chris, welcome. I can certainly help a bit. If there are specific questions, if you could put those in there. There is a link here to a Discord chat. It's also just above, and I'll have more information on how you can reach out to me and other folks for help right after this, Chris. But if you have specific questions, that's the best. That would be very helpful. So we have these templates that can help us out so you don't have to start from scratch. Other things to consider about data, who's going to own it and maintain it. Olympia mentioned earlier the updating and managing all of the assets is challenging. So like any process or anything that you have, you want to make sure that there's someone or some team that clearly owns and maintains that stuff. In the example of Jira, that Jira Service Management, that might be my IT team. They use it to track all of the incoming requests, so they own it. They handle the configuration and everything. They might get help, like I might help them out as the admin, but on the day-to-day, they take care of all of that. Next is, how does data come in? No worries, Franks. Glad you could make it. This live stream and this training is probably not your number one priority. I can easily manage other things, so I'm glad you're here. Next is, how do you get data? And this might impact how things happen, but in this example, if you're getting data from another vendor, maybe you have a different object schema for that data. You don't try and stuff it into your object schema with the phone. Another thing to consider is, how is it going to be used? We mentioned multiple departments. Actually, and this is the other way. In this example, if multiple groups use departments, maybe that should be a single schema instead of having 5 different department schemas. So here we need to not just consider our one Jira project we're using, but we have to consider how we use all of Jira and how do different teams impact it. So as the admin, as the person who has this knowledge on assets, we need to have a broader vision than just one team or than just one area. We need to expand our vision of what we see to the entire organization so we can really help understand. I have seen this exact problem show up, not in Jira, but in other systems, where each group in my organization tracks locations differently. And this makes it impossible to report and do anything because I have to then consolidate and reconcile differences. So in this example, we found one piece of data department that multiple groups use. Let's just have one schema for it. And we've mentioned updates. Manual updates are terrible. Not terrible. Manual updates can be very challenging. Kythra, I'm glad they help you get up early, but if you need sleep, please sleep. Health is more important. And this is more of a general data thing. We don't want to have the same information in more than one spot. That department example is perfect. I don't want to have departments in multiple places in Jira, and I don't want to have departments in multiple spots because it makes it hard to track and maintain. Here are a ton of best practices. I'm not going to read all these just for the sake of time. But these are all things that we need to consider. It's things like having a solid use case and a solid inventory to start with, because that then helps us figure out if we're on the right track or not. General object types that can be referenced. So this is something we should read through. This may or may not show up on the exam, but it's just a good way to use the tool. It helps us avoid some problems as we go. Here's a good example. Instead of having multiple agreement object types for different types of agreements, really we need a single object type called agreement, and then an attribute could be the type of agreement. So where we store the information in the hierarchy is also important. And then assets and configuration items should have relationships. So we've got an asset representing a component that has to be managed. Each infrastructure asset has a direct or indirect relationship with different service items. I'll have to think through that one to truly unpack it. Creating object schemas. So we're going to pop back into Jira, and I think we've already kind of done this. Yeah, we're just going to pop over here. I've got my hardware catalog. I'm just going to click this plus. And again, this is similar to the Confluence content hierarchy, if you're familiar with that. And I have Apple laptops. This will just add a new thing into my schema tree. So now I have a thing, an object type called Apple laptops. And I might add a new object to it. And this object might be called MacBook Pro 16-inch. And so now I have an instance, I have an object in here under Apple laptops that has a single attribute. And we probably need to click over to attributes. And now I can see all the attributes that are listed under Apple laptops. Here are my 4 defaults. I've got key, created, update, name. But I can add more. Maybe I have serial number. Here are my types. So I want this type to be default. And they're text. And I'll just click add. And I would repeat this for each one of them. So if I go back to objects, I'll now see a serial number, and I can add in my serial number. Yay. And now I've added both an object type, but also an object within that type. Frank is saying we can't move objects and assets. You lose linked work items to the previous asset unless you relink them. I'd be curious, Justin, if an automation can help with that. I'm saying it that way because I don't know off the top of my head, but my knee jerk is, I wonder if we can use that to unlink and relink things as we move them around. So adding objects, pretty straightforward. We can make this a hierarchy just by clicking and dragging. So I now have an object type called Windows Laptop. This is probably a bad example. I really should put these under supported laptops. There we go. So I now have a hardware catalog. In that hardware catalog, I have a group called supported laptops. And in that group, I have these 2 items. So under supported laptops, I have Windows laptops and Apple laptops. Each of these object types can have different attributes. And so this is probably not the best example because I could just have supported laptops, and Apple and Mac, it doesn't matter, can be objects in there. And I could have an attribute telling me, and I actually see it right here, is this Apple, is this, wow, Amazon, all the different possible manufacturers. Ooh, an abstract type. This is a new concept for me. We can have an object type called an abstract, which means no objects can be put within it. It just passes on attribute values to children. Huh. I'm trying to think through. I'll see if I can come up with an example of when I would use that. And as we've mentioned, there is access controls to object types. So we can restrict the ability to access them, and they also inherit down. So as I have children, the permissions can be pulled down from the parent, so I don't have to keep adding it. Oh, yes, Frank, we do talk inheritance. Configuring attributes. Again, up here in the top right. Oh, my Zoom works. Look at that. I can just click on attributes, and I can see all of the attributes for these. And here I can see this is a reference field. So my supported devices is referencing something else. An important call out, we can't set defaults. Trying to think of a good reason why not, other than they just don't want us to. But just be aware that we cannot default values in for attributes. We'll have to go add them manually or through some kind of automated process. So if we have a manual import or a bulk upload, we'd have to ensure it's all included in there because the system won't automatically add them for us. After we add them, how do we add it? Or how do we reconfigure it? Back into assets. So objects. Nope, it was in attributes. Attribute settings. Ooh, cardinality. And a suffix. Huh. This is new stuff for Rob. There is that configure button. Interesting. This looks different than what we're seeing. Cardinality, the number of allowed values. Oh, interesting. It's considered mandatory if the minimum number is greater than 0. That is a good question, Frank. Can we use abstract values in the reference as well? I will have to find out. Last parting thought before we go to our final slides, but don't rename the name attribute, as this can cause problems. I always love when I see stuff like this. I always ask myself, why don't they just prevent us from renaming it? Like, just don't allow us to do that. If it's going to cause problems, just prevent us. But again, some additional best practice. Have a naming convention. Ooh, here we go. Just so when folks look at it, they know what they're looking at. Don't allow free form entry. Text fields can be very hard to work with over time. You'll end up with different spellings of words or different capitalizations. So try and force things into selectable values. User and group attribute types to simplify automation. There's a lot to unpack in assets. What I'm going to do is schedule another assets session. So we'll have another hour of assets before we get to our review. I do need your help, though. This link goes to a Google form, and I'll dig up the link real quick and share it as well. But I'm curious how these sessions can be better for y'all. I want to make sure you are getting as much value as possible out of these. That if there's things I'm doing or not doing you want me to start or stop, please let me know. I love your feedback. Just a quick 4 questions on what I can be doing better or how I can change these to help you. Now, I've already gotten some feedback on things like, move all the questions to the end. So I'm trying to find ways to capture questions so I can answer them, and also shifting a little bit in how I present things. So please let me know what makes the most sense for you, how you want me to change things so I can meet those needs, especially as we are coming out. Another ACP is coming up, and I'll announce that in just a minute. I do also have a Udemy course on ticketing system fundamentals, and this link goes to a coupon code. I'll drop it in the chat as well. This is a couple hours on... Discord didn't work for you, Samantha. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. I've had a couple people let me know. Is there a specific error you've seen? We did not... I don't believe we have, Frank. We've mostly covered the basics and concepts of it. But this Udemy course covers the basics of help desk fundamentals and also digs a little bit into Jira Service Management. This is more basic stuff intended for like a project admin, not for a full-on Jira admin. Oh, my head's in the way of the QR code. Can I just make my head part of the QR code? Whee, there we go. I'll hide down here. How's that? Oh, I'll just entirely disappear. Why am I falling off the world here? Anyway. I did ask for a lot of feedback. What is the next ACP we should be doing? And I have a fun little drum roll here that hopefully is not too loud. Here we go. Yay! So it's going to be the 520, which is Atlassian Cloud Org Admin. So this is going to dig into how we manage our cloud organizations. Anytime, Chad. I'm glad I could help out. This one will start probably in 3 weeks after we're done with ACP-420. I'm going to insert 1 more hour for assets so we can really dig into them more. And then we'll have just a full review of ACP-420. So be on the lookout for updated dates. This has always been the error message. So Samantha, what I might recommend, if you're comfortable, pop me an email, robert@heen.tech, and I'll see what I can do to help out. And also see if I can troubleshoot what's going on, if it's something on my side. I want to make sure if you want to get in that you can. Otherwise, folks, I may bump. We may have a session next week. I might need to bump it, though. I've got some things going on, so be on the lookout, if you get an update. But please go get hands-on. Pop into a Jira instance and tinker with assets and just click around. Especially if it's a test instance, you can't hurt anything. But review this recording if you need to, and check out other people's content. There's a lot of great, other great sessions on the Atlassian Live Learning stuff that cover assets and JSM. So please go check those out. The more perspective you can get, the more information you can get, the stronger you're going to be in terms of skills, but also the easier the exam's going to feel because you'll have more information. I do want to thank you all for sitting around with me. I do want to thank you all for sitting around with me for an hour to talk about assets and throughout this whole series. Again, I started this because I needed time to study. It started as half an hour, and now we are like 16 hours later, which I think is pretty cool. I'm going to keep this open for a little bit, and then I'm going to jump off. But please drop any last-minute questions in here. Please drop anything else you want to learn or share, and I'll just keep this open for a moment. Samantha, thank you for the email. Frank, do you plan to share the courses you went through? My friend, what I did... Can I easily back up? Yes. I will drop this link in here again, and I'll try and add it to the YouTube. This link goes to the live learning for JSM-420 or ACP-420. So I essentially just went through these start to bottom. Now they changed this when I started doing the recordings. The exam had been updated. You're welcome, Scott. Thank you, Chad. So it looks a little bit different in the early recordings. But as I was studying and as we're doing these, I just opened this up and I went to the first one and I went through this one and then I went through that one and then that one and that one and that one. And then just repeated this through each of these live learning modules. Now for the ACP-520, I've got ideas for other content I can provide and other tools and references and support. So be on the lookout for those. But for this one, I mainly relied on the Atlassian learning stuff. It was returned. Well, Samantha, let me go over to my email right now and see if my email actually works. It should work. Yeah, it should work. It's the other place you can reach out to me, Samantha, is LinkedIn, actually. Let me go grab my LinkedIn link for you. Here we go. LinkedIn. That might be another way you can reach out to me. I'm sorry you're having trouble getting in, trouble with the email. Yes, Frank, there are a lot of learnings. They want us to know a lot about these ACP things. And that's part of my challenge and the fun for me is to figure out how do I boil that down to give you the best of the best. All the Atlassian learning stuff is great. It's all super free too, which is really cool. All right, folks, I'm going to jump off. Thank you so much for learning with me. This recording will be available soon after YouTube processes it. Please pop into that Discord if you can. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Talk to other people. Get hands-on. But don't make this the only time you experience assets. It can be a very useful tool, and just understanding what it's for can be a massive step in the right direction. So thank you all again. I'll look forward to seeing you next week or next time, and be on the lookout for more soon.